Gap IID tool versus this Launch CR reader. Which one's better? Which one's better value for money? I don't know. Let's dig into the details and find out. Okay, so for this comparison, I'm just going to refer to my notes here because I've scribbled down a fair bit. There's probably a bit to go through, so it's just a bit easy for me. So, look, obviously, first step in the comparison, it's going to be a cost thing, right? So, the Gap tool isn't the cheapest. Australian dollars, it is, I roughly converted this a few weeks ago, so Australian dollar conversion may have changed, but roughly about $780 to buy a brand new one. If you're lucky, you can get a second-hand one. They seem to be going for about 400, 450 Australian, thereabouts. The Launch, on the other hand, from King Boleyn, the company that supplied the one that I've got, you're looking at $300 Australian sort of tops. It is on special. It's been on special ever since I've got it, so I don't know how long that lasts, but that is, I think it was like $109 or something like that. Don't quote me, I'll probably mess it up. So fair bit of a difference there. Is that cost justified with the Gap tool? Well, let's go through my list of notes and find out. So probably the first thing I'd want to note is the Gap tool is actually VIN locked. So all the advanced features, apart from basically everything apart from basically reading a fault code, is considered their advanced by features, and they are locked to a VIN. So if you have more than one Land Rover, you'll need to have the license for each one of those. I think from memory there was like a limit of about 5 vehicles on the Gap tool. It may not be an issue for you, but if you swap a vehicle, you're upgrading it, you're going to have to get another license on the Gap tool. Launch, don't have to worry about that. That's just basically one license. Well, it's not even a license. You get the unit and it works on pretty much all the Land Rovers. I'm just going to make note as well. So the fault code reading ability, I can't pick the difference between them. Now, I'm really only comparing with Disco 3 and 4, that sort of era Range Rovers as well, like the Range Rover Sport. The newer vehicles, like probably the Disco 5 and Defender and the current Range Rovers, I'm not sure on this functionality with this because these have internet connection protocols required for their diagnostics, which are a bit of a pain. So I'm not too sure how they would compare directly because I haven't tested it. I have a feeling the Gap may be slightly better in that regard, but I'm not going to speculate much further than that because it's something I haven't looked at. Probably the next main thing is going to be the user interface. Now, to be honest, the Gap used to be able to use had a party trick where you used to be able to use the cruise control buttons on the steering wheel as your interface on your cluster. I believe the current generation that is no longer a thing. So let's just disregard that because like mine had that feature, and to be honest, I hardly ever used it, to be honest. All the way time I used it was on the mobile app and the Bluetooth interface. Essentially, the two user interfaces, there's not much in it really. They're both pretty straightforward to use. Yeah, I wouldn't pick one as being harder than the other. The Launch seems very, very similar to the Gap in the way the menu's laid out. So, geez, there may even be a copy of it. Who knows? But yeah, not really much in it. I'd call it pretty much even. So also in regards to that diagnostic ability, so they can both read and clear faults. The live values aren't too bad. Now, I remember in talking about live values, I remember in my initial review, I mentioned with the live trend on the Launch that it could pull up only just one parameter. You'll be able to pull up your live values from all those modules as well. It does run things in a nice little graph as well. Probably only limitation that I could see is you could only run like one parameter at a time for a graph. That is not correct. I have had a bit more of a play with it. Like, you can actually do 4 all in one graph, so that is pretty handy. The Gap can do a lot more than 4 from memory, so you know that's got a bit of an advantage there. But yeah, it's not so bad. Both can do control input outputs for like interior light testing, things like that. I can't really see any difference in that. So another point to the Gap tool is the ability to modify the vehicle's CCF or the car configuration files. Now, this probably extends a little bit further with the Gap as well, in that you can reflash modules with the Gap, whereas you can't with the Launch. What does that mean in reality for probably 99% of users? Look, you're probably not going to need it all that often. The CCF, I had personally done a couple of little things initially, and I hadn't really played with it ever since. About the only time I really need the flash ability with the Gap tool is when I had a faulty instrument cluster that I replaced with a second-hand module. I was able to recode that to the vehicle's VIN and everything with the Gap tool. You're not going to be able to do that with the Launch. The other possible ability thing that I would think would be a common thing to do is, if you've got an older D3 with the Hitachi air suspension compressor, is that you are able to update the software for the newer AMK version. To be honest, like, I had that ability with the Gap tool. I replaced the suspension compressor, but with the old Hitachi still, because hey, why not? It was cheaper. So yeah, that is an ability that you are going to be missing with the Launch that you can get with the Gap. Now, since we're talking about air suspension as well, both of them can do air suspension calibrations. So all your height calibrations, if you replace a sensor. One thing that the Gap probably has a little bit better is you can set personalization height levels on your calibration. It's kind of basically like if you wanted to set like an off-road height or a highway height. The Gap is obviously a lot quicker to do that. It's still, to be honest, if I was going to be using that sort of feature, I'd probably look at using like an X-Lifter or a LAMS system anyway, mainly because it's a hell of a lot quicker. It's just a change of a switch. Yeah, so the Launch for doing calibrations is a little bit more involved, probably a bit more of a manual process. You won't have those personalization settings that you can just have saved. So yeah, but you can do calibrations. And talking of calibrations, like the Launch and the Gap can both basically reset and calibrate sensors throughout the vehicle. So think of things like your steering angle sensor, transfer case, clutch settings, your auto trans adaptions, all that sort of stuff. They can both do that pretty well equally from what I can see. Both can reset the service interval indicators. There's no issues there. And I've already touched before, so with the reflashing, the Gap can basically do updates and reflashing modules. You can do engine remapping with certain companies as well with the Gap unit, so they can basically load a file to your Gap profile and you can update it and reflash your ECU if you so desire. And from what I can see, both can do key reprogramming, so that's a pretty handy feature. So I guess the question comes down to, really, the big difference is being able to reflash modules, right? The Gap can do it, the Launch can't. Is that worth nearly double the cost? Look, I would say for probably 95% of the times you're going to use OBD scanner, you're probably not going to need the reflash ability, right? And is it worth saving the extra money and using something like the Launch that can do pretty much 95% of the work? And if you need to do some of those extra things, just go see your local indie or service agent, whatever. They should be able to do that for you, not a problem. Yeah, I would say Mate, for me, that would be a pretty easy question to answer. I'd go for the cheaper unit any time. But I'm kind of a bit of a cheapskate. But I guess I'm not a cheapskate as such. Like, I did buy a Gap unit initially, and I guess at the time there was not really, apart from the Nanocom, there wasn't really many other options out there. So yeah, but now it's things have changed a little bit, I think. So whether people have gotten onto these higher level DIY units and copied them, I don't know. But the functionality is just as good, to be honest. It's like I said, it's 95% of the way there. And that to me would be pretty much good enough to use for most people. Some people are going to be probably quite uncomfortable with actually reflashing a module anyway, in case they brick the whole way vehicle. So, because it's definitely a possibility that could happen. One thing that I would mention as well is Gap support for their product is fantastic. So on its own could be worth the extra money. So I'd give them full credit for that. You're not going to get the same level of support with most other products out there, I wouldn't think. So yeah, kudos to Gap for that. So anyway, that is my comparison video. I hope this is helpful for you. It helps you make up a decision which way you want to go. And if you like this video, don't forget to like and throw a comment as well. If you're new to the channel, if you like subscribing, I'd greatly appreciate it as well. So if you're already an existing subscriber, maybe even consider becoming a member. We've got Byron from Down the Shed with Byron, Bad Q Garage, Dave, Disco Works, Rob, and I'm going to mispronounce his name, Jan, however it is. Yeah, apologies. You'll have to tell me how it is, how it's done. So, hey pup, you want to say hello too? Say, hello everyone, thanks for watching, and I'll see you later. You're right there.